Hi, good morning. My name is Tammy Esponge, the Association Executive for the Apartment Association of Greater New Orleans and Louisiana. Happy to be here today for the 2023 NAA IRO Conference. And today, myself and colleague Charlie Fontenelle will be speaking on preparing your property and residence and understanding your property insurance policies. Charlie will be on shortly. I'm going to first kick off with preparing your property and your team. I know all of you are smaller owners. You may have a team, you may not. This will be helpful information to you in preparing your sites and your residents in the event of emergency. Understand we have been through Hurricane Katrina, Ida, Laura, and so many other storms. And we actually developed this program following Hurricane Katrina. We thought we were well prepared as that storm came through, and we realized we weren't. Are we ever going to be 100% prepared? Probably not, but this will help us be better prepared in the event, not just a hurricane, maybe a snowstorm, fires, floods, all these other natural disasters we see going on throughout the country. This will be very helpful information, although most of the presentation will refer to hurricane evacuations, but you may have to evacuate for a flood or a snowstorm coming. So, and forms and different things like that I'll talk about during my presentation. So here's kind of the session agenda. We're going to be talking about preparing your property and residence for an pre-emergency, what to know post-emergency, and then understanding your insurance policy. So first, we're going to talk about preparing your property and your team. If you have a team, some of you may have a team. You may only have one employee. It may just be yourself. So this would still be helpful to you in preparing in the event of a natural disaster. And if you have that time to get things done. And I realize, maybe for fires and things like that, that's not possible. But if there is an evacuation that's going to take place for any type of natural disaster, this information will be most helpful to you. Of course, you should have a team meeting, and it should take place before any type of natural disaster may occur if you are alerted prior to that natural disaster happening. Review your company's storm plans or emergency plans and preparation plans for the event of that emergency. Once you know a storm, whether it's a snowstorm or a rainstorm or a hurricane or a flood is headed in your direction, a team meeting should take place and your hurricane plan should go into place, or your storm plan should go into place. If they're able to, pick up all movable properties on the property to avoid those being, with high winds, being tossed around on the property and causing additional damage. Turn off your pools before evacuating and leaving your sites. If your property has access gates, electric access gates, I would open all those access gates and leave them open. As 9 times out of 10, when you have a natural disaster, you will come back and there's not going to be electricity, and you'll want to be able to have access in and out of the property without having to break those control gates. So I would definitely leave those gates open. Of course, you should back up your computers and communicate with upper management or your owners, which most of you are owners, on what electronic items figure out which electronic items you're going to take with you. Most people are on laptops today, so you can take your whole computer system with you. If you are a larger independent rental owner, you may have a backup system that you work with and put information on there, and that's absolutely fine as well. I would pick up any type of electronics off of the floor if you have hard drives, or if you think they may be flooding, that will happen. That would certainly be recommended to do that. Absolutely, you want to notify your residents of what's going on. Of course, board up your offices and clubhouses and any type of common area space that may be impacted by that upcoming natural disaster. You want to make sure you take important documents with you. Have contact information for all your residents. Update your contractor list and have a copy of that with you, whether it's on your laptop, in your phone, however you keep records. I would highly recommend you have all that on hand with you. Secure your roofs, clear drains and catch basins that they're clear of debris. If your property has trash chutes, elevators, stairwells, secure those areas and make sure they're clear of debris. Maintenance should have an emergency kit on hand. Make sure you have plywood, screws, vinyl sheeting, flashlights, batteries, duct tape, caution tape, first aid kit. Other items to include would be water, rope, wet, dry bags, buckets, disposable cameras, non-perishable food items, fire extinguishers, keys to the office, and other common areas. And might say, well, why disposable cameras? Well, although we have cameras on all of our phones today, if you come back and there's no power and you have no way to charge your phone, you're going to be unable to take pictures. So I recommend that you always have a couple of disposable cameras on hand to be able to take those pictures of damage or whatever the case may be at your property. So that's something good to have on hand in the event following, post-storm, you would actually need that. If you have generators on your site, you want to make sure that they're operable condition and have gas for those generators. If you have any type of construction work going on or contractors that have been working on your property, if you're able to, I would make sure that that work's completed. They've removed the items from any of their work items from your property, and that all that is secured. All your staff and team members should have a contact list with cell numbers and email addresses of each team member on the property. Owner and manager should have contact numbers and email addresses of the owner and supervisors and vice versa to be able to communicate. Most of us all have cell phones, of course, so there's text messaging available and those kinds of things. But again, cell service may not be working, so you certainly want to have a backup plan of another way to communicate with your contractors, with your staff, with whomever it may be. I would highly recommend having some other type of backup if the phone service is down and not working. If you have the internet, maybe you have a web portal, those types of, employee web portal they can go to, or you set up some type of site for that. Determine if all your staff is going to be evacuating or leaving the area based on that, the severity of that natural disaster coming your way. Who's going to be leaving? Who's going to be staying? Find out maybe from your contractors that you use as well. Are they going to be around after the fact? Maybe put them on standby for post-storm repairs. Find out if your company or if you're an owner, do you have an employee portal or website online that employees can check in and communicate, as well as cell phones and emails? If you have police or security that work on your property year-round, you want to communicate with them as well and let them know what's going on and have their contact info as well as them having yours, which I'm sure you all do. But just to point out there, make sure those numbers, contact numbers and email addresses are updated. All team members and those associated with the property need to be informed of the plan of action and kept updated. Everyone needs to be kept updated. All your staff, your contractors, your residents even need to be updated. And how do we prepare our residents? So one of the things we found out after Hurricane Katrina here in New Orleans is, yes, we had websites and we had backups and we had things like that. One of the biggest challenges we found our owners had, and whether they were large owners or small owners, it didn't matter. Even some of our largest management companies, they didn't have updated contact information on their residents. We had massive flooding here in the New Orleans area after Katrina, and people left. Their companies relocated them to Texas and other places, and we did not have, some did not have good email addresses or good cell phone numbers on those residents, and it was hard to reach them to find out what was going on. So one of the things we have in our hurricane preparedness guide, along with several forms, is at least twice a year you should communicate with your residents and get updated contact information, cell phone numbers, email addresses, especially when that time of year comes that you may have that snowstorm or you may have that flooding time or that hurricane that may be coming. It's important to have updated information of those residents so that you're able to communicate, because we struggled with that following Hurricane Katrina as it relates to, we had apartments that were flooded, soaking wet furniture and carpet, and we had no way to reach them. So that was a real challenge. And we needed to, you want to start mitigating as soon as possible to prevent further damage happening to the property. So it's important that we update our communication records with our residents at least twice a year, I would say. In the event, depending on the type of natural disaster, of course, in here we have our hurricane or tropical storm, or maybe it's a snowstorm, or whatever it may be coming your way. You want to ask residents to maybe remove all the items on their balconies and patios to secure those. The wind gusts too high, that could throw those items off that balcony or patio and cause further damage to the property. This would strictly be up to owners if you would decide to do such a thing. Sometimes when you come back from a natural disaster, doesn't matter the type of natural disaster, there could be water issues with your water company, and toilets won't be able to flush, or the water systems aren't working, or maybe there's no power for those water systems to put, pump water in. Maybe you recommend to your residents filling their tubs up with water before leaving. That could help with flushing toilets and things like that to maybe help with that situation. Totally up to your discretion if you want just a tip or a suggestion we've put out there. Also, I would recommend that you request your residents to clean out their refrigerators. Another big challenge we found after Hurricane Katrina, everyone left, and when we came back, there were the refrigerators. There was no power for almost 2 weeks, some places longer than 2 weeks. And that was a mess, and almost every single refrigerator had to be replaced. That was a huge expense for property owners. So if you have that time, and there is time, and you have enough preparation time for that evacuation, I'd recommend to your residents to clean out their refrigerators. That way you wouldn't have to come back and have to replace all those refrigerators following that natural disaster. Of course, if your county or parish or state or wherever you live, if there is an evacuation order issued, you need to encourage your residents to evacuate and follow what local officials recommend. Your local government should have evacuation routes to follow, and you can follow up with them to find out what those are. I do know here in Louisiana, once a mandatory evacuation order is issued and residents do not heed that mandatory evacuation order, once the height of that storm is coming in, whether it's a hurricane or something else, they're not going to send first responders out until after the brunt of that storm has passed, because they're not going to put their safety, until put their lives in danger until after that hard part of that storm has passed over. So that's really important. If there are evacuations put in place by your local government, residents should heed that warning and get out of that area. Again, post-emergency, if your company has a website, recommend residents to visit your website to receive information about the property. If you don't have websites for your properties, and that's okay, a phone number needs to be given to residents to find out information on what's going on with the property, or a text, a phone number they can text, or they can receive text messages from the property about what's going on. Can they come back? Is there power? How much damage is to the property? If you have websites, maybe you have a portal on that website where you can post that information, because the last thing you want is for a resident to come back prematurely and the property's obliviated, or it's completely damaged, or roofs have fallen in because of a snowstorm, or flooding occurred because it was a hurricane, or a roof was ripped off because of wind damage. So you want to make sure you have a way to communicate with those residents before they come back on site, because then once residents start coming back, not only do you have to deal with repairing the property, now you have to deal with the residents on the property at that. So a way to communicate, I would highly recommend whatever you would see fit that would work best for you and your property and your residents. I'd also recommend to your residents, if they are evacuating, to contact family members if they're going to stay with them and make those arrangements. Find out which shelters may be available if they're unable to get out of town. Have that information available to your residents, and maybe make hotel reservations depending on where they're evacuating to. Just let them know whether you're going to go with family, you're going to go with the shelter. Have that information available and preparation for them to do that. As I previously stated, you want to provide on-site staff with emergency contact phone numbers and emails and any updates to your contact info. Have an evacuation plan in place for tell residents they should have some type of evacuation plan in place, as I just said. I'd highly recommend you share with your residents upon moving in, or if they're current residents, they should have renter's insurance. You may require that. I am seeing more and more where property owners are requiring renter's insurance and flood insurance. If there's flooding that goes on down here in the South, of course, a lot of property owners highly recommend that residents get flood as well as renter's insurance. Your personal property will not be covered by the property or company insurance. I would let your residents know that as well. Tell residents to repair their apartment. Remove all items from patios and balconies, as I said. Tell them to pick up their computers, take them with them. Remove items from the window and cover items as they see fit. Again, prior to evacuating, have those refrigerators cleaned out. Also, on a tip sheet, make sure they have all their medicines filled and have that with them when they evacuate the area. Also, you might want to tell them to fill water jugs with water for their return. There may be limited or no water supply upon coming back. Pets, in the event you evacuate, please tell them to take their pets with them. One of many things we saw after Katrina was the animals that were left behind. And I get it, some people couldn't take them, maybe the shelters wouldn't allow them, but they need to try and find a way to take care of those pets if they plan to evacuate or leave the area. Items they should have on hand during that storm season, whether it's winter storms or hurricane storms or whatever it may be: a first aid kit, medication, and prescription drugs. Always want to have your insurance and important documents with you. Bottled water, canned food, disinfectant, bleach, insect repellent, gloves, flashlight and extra batteries, personal toiletries and sanitary needs, and ice chests for ice and those types of things. You also want to check your vehicle, tire pressure, gas, etc. Have available cash. If the power goes out, you're not going to be able to use ATMs anywhere. And maybe a store may be open with no electricity and selling non-perishable food items. So you want to make sure you may have cash on hand. Monitor your property. If you have a website, you want to tell them to monitor the website, or whatever that phone number is, or whatever, however you're going to communicate with your residents. You want to have that information available to them to be able to find out what's going on with the property. And please tell them not to return to the area until local officials have deemed it safe to return to the area. Some tips on emergency for the property for owners and team members. If possible, set up a command post to establish for all employees to report to. Information should also be posted on the company website for employees to stay updated. Again, if you don't have a website, figure out a way how you're going to communicate with staff if you have staff. Check with local officials to find out if anyone's allowed to enter the parish. Management and maintenance should return to their properties ASAP in order to assess damage and answer questions from the residents if residents chose to stay on site. Notify your power company of any fallen trees, power lines, etc. Any loose debris on the property should be picked up and removed immediately, especially if residents may be on property or are coming back before they're supposed to. Rope off any damaged areas if you're unable to remove those items. Try and rope that off and keep that at bay so people don't walk in that area. A complete property inspection should be completed and all damage should be reported. This includes all interior and exterior apartment homes. Take photos. Again, make sure you have those disposable cameras. Although we have all that technology today on our phones, you can't charge that phone and you're not going to be able to get pictures. That's not going to be helpful to you. I would definitely recommend having those disposable. Contact any residents that have damage to their units. I'm going to share with you some forms in a few minutes. If your postal service is not operating in your area, you should have your mail redirected to an outside area using a P.O. box. Helpful phone numbers I've included on the slide here are to FEMA, their website, and also SBA, Small Business Association.gov, and phone numbers that will be helpful. And this would be wherever there's natural disaster in any part of the country you could use. Here's a couple of some sample forms we used. This is a contact form. If you don't have a website portal, you can certainly take this form I've included. This is to update their contact information twice a year. Their name lists all the occupants in the apartment, addresses, phone numbers, cell numbers, work numbers, email addresses, if they have pets, should they evacuate, just different things on there. It's very helpful and can keep you updated on your residents, and how to reach them should their apartment be damaged post a storm. Approaching of a storm. Now, so if there's a snowstorm or a hurricane, or that natural disaster is coming, this next form would be a way for you to communicate that with them. Telling them to monitor the National Weather Service has issued a storm warning. Of course, we have Southeast Louisiana in here, wherever your area may be. Telling them to please monitor the news, listen to local parish government officials, and dropping this back off, the resident contact form back off at your offices. So that's a good way to let them know something's happening out there, and it's important that they pay attention to local government and news channels. This is something I kind of talked about earlier when there was so much damage to the properties and apartment homes flooded and their furniture was wet and they left and they never came back. Well, we all know we can't just throw resident, it doesn't matter how damaged it is. They can't just throw their things out without getting their permission, or filing an eviction, if you will. So we came up with this authorization to dispose residents' damaged personal property. And it clearly tells you what it is, and we have to sign it, they have to sign it. And back after Katrina, if we were able to scan and email it, we did. A lot of people received it by fax because we didn't have all of our equipment up and running. You could also send it to them and by phone, whatever your form of communication is. But this is a great way to start mitigating the property and getting rid of all the damage. The wet furniture, the wet carpets, is by using this form you see here that you have authorization to get rid of their things. They've signed it, you've signed it, it's dated, it has their unit number, everything on there to make sure we're doing the right things. This next one is on abandoned apartment units with personal property left. This is residents who just said, I'm not coming back, I won't be back, whatever, I don't want my stuff. Well, that's fine, but we still need to get their permission to dispose of their things. This one's a little bit different than the previous form, but certainly you're welcome to look at this, use it if needed. And again, all of these forms and all of these things we're talking about, it's not just related to hurricane damage. This can be for any type of natural disaster that your property may experience, even if it's a fire, at your property. Some of these forms may be helpful and useful to you. Uninhabitable unit property notification. So whatever devastation may have been caused, maybe where I saw a lot, trees have gone through third-story apartment homes. The unit's uninhabitable, they can't come back and live in it. Once we adhere that the property is safe or the unit apartment home is safe, we will escort them in to try and collect any personal belongings that are left in there. But this is to notify them that their unit is uninhabitable and they will not be able to come back to it until repairs are made. That form is also useful to you. So this is kind of the short presentation of preparing your property and your team, and also some helpful forms that can be useful to you and your team if you have a full staff in the event of a natural disaster or emergency, whether it's fire, flood, snowstorm, or whatever else may come your way. I hope my information has been most helpful to you. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Charlie Fontenelle. So I will hand it over to Charlie now. And Charlie's going to speak about insurance and questions and important information you need to know about your property insurance.
Hi, my name is Charlie Fontenelle. I am an insurance agent in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Been a member of the Apartment Association for about 30-something years, and I concentrate mainly in apartment insurance. Today, we're going to go over a couple slides, and I'm going to answer some questions or at least expound on these ideas on what you need to do in the event of a storm approaching or what you should know about your insurance policy. Obviously, we are in what's called a really hard market here in South Louisiana. We've had numerous storms over the last 3 or 4 years, and this has caused the price of insurance to go way up. It is important that you understand what your insurance policy covers and what it doesn't cover, because you don't want to wait until after the claim to find out. Okay, so let's start off with this, the very first one, and that is, what questions should you be asking your insurance agent when shopping for insurance? Okay, everybody must understand that a insurance policy is a contract between the insured and the insurance company. So when you fill out an application, that is the basis of the contract. The questions that you answer and the values that you put down, or you and your agent, I should say, is going to be the same coverages that are in the policy, but sometimes there's lots of exclusions and limitations that are not normal for a policy, and it's due to this weather that we're having. It's due to the high winds and the claims that we've been having over the last couple of years. Okay, so my first suggestion is that you read your policy, especially the exclusions and the limitations. So in a policy, there's always a forms and endorsements page. And this page lists all of the different forms that are inside the policy. This is a very important page that you should review, not on your own, but also with your insurance agent, so that if you're interested in reading any of the forms, they're always in the policy, but the agent can get the forms for you prior to binding your insurance. This way you know exactly what you're buying, right? And you're binding, it's a contract. So everybody normally knows where to go in their policy to see their building limits, like, building limits, contents limits, loss of rents. But those are just one part of the contract. The part of the contract that I'm encouraging you to really get to know, along with your agent, are these exclusions and limitations, because these are going to be the surprises that come out when you have a claim. Okay. I think an insurance policy is similar to like your birth certificate. If you were going to evacuate New Orleans, you need your insurance policy with you, because if you can't get back into New Orleans, or worse yet, all of your documents are destroyed by a claim, now you have to wait until your agent gets back to his office to be able to get a policy to you. So always take your insurance policies with you. Okay. The insurance company can produce another copy for you while you're on the road or evacuated, but it's just convenient to have it with you. You can call your agent, you can call your claims adjuster just by looking in your policy. Okay. The next thing is company strength. And we refer to this as liquidity, right? AM Best rates insurance companies, and obviously AM Best is going to give the biggest companies the strongest, rating, and that would be an A+15. So that's the highest rating AM Best can give to any insurance company. Most lenders require at least an A10 for you to be with them. Okay, so that is important, that you make sure that you insure yourself with a very strong company that will be there when the claim is presented and have enough money to pay the claims even after a catastrophe such as Hurricane Katrina or Ida. So get your agent to tell you what the AM Best rating is. You can do some research yourself on the internet, and just make sure that you're with a very strong company to begin with. Okay. In the state of Louisiana, we had 12 homeowners insurance companies go under after the last storm. And that is not a good sign, but it is, unfortunately, in the state of Louisiana, we just don't have the standard insurance companies writing homeowners. The companies that are writing apartments here in New Orleans, you can get A-rated companies. And so make sure that you're with a very strong company. Okay. The other thing you need to know is, and your agent should tell you this, is that you should be purchasing replacement cost value coverage, because this is required by your lender. Replacement cost is there to hopefully replace the building in the event that it's lost to a fire or a storm. And if you do not cover yourself on replacement cost, you're probably going to be on actual cash value. Lenders do not accept actual cash value. And the word actual cash value is defined as replacement costs less the depreciation of your building. So if you're in a building that is 10 years old, the insurance company is not going to bring it back to replacement cost during a claim. They're only going to give you the money that would be due for replacement costs less depreciation. Okay. So again, this is something that you need to speak with your agent about. The causes of loss in a policy, there's three different causes of losses: special, broad, and basic. Well, basic is the word. There's 10 coverages on a basic policy. That's it. If it's not one of these 10 coverages, you don't have any coverage. Broad is a little bit bigger. It's 17 coverages. But again, if it's the loss is caused by anything other than those 17, you have no coverage. Special form is the form you should buy. Special form says we cover everything unless it is specifically excluded in the policy. So always purchase special form. And then the last thing here in Louisiana, we are just in a hard market. So the deductibles are now 5% of the total insured value of the building. Well, that's fine if you know, if you have a small building. Unfortunately, most of my apartments that I insure, the buildings are almost $1 million. So this would be one building getting damaged would be a large loss, right? But if all of the buildings are damaged, the property owner really has to go to his reserves to be able to meet the deductible, to be able to replace the buildings. Okay. So we'll get into that a little later, and then just know that there is a product called a deductible buy down. It is a separate policy that you can buy to bring your deductible down from 5 or 10%, because we're seeing these in the market now, down to something that maybe your lender requires or that you just feel more comfortable with, the owner and the investment partners. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, and that would be how to find a trusted insurance company representative. And do you trust your source? Well, you know, this is just like anything else, trying to find a good air conditioner man or a good doctor. So what you do is the apartment association has vetted members. We have insurance agents that have been members for many, many years here. And so therefore you could easily find, you know, who these agents insure and who, you know, who you can go to those people and ask them if this is a trusted agent. Okay. I would refer to you to some of the older apartment owners that you trust in your association, because they could obviously refer you to their agent. And of course, I will tell you that these insurance buyers, that they have some good stories and some bad stories about insurance agents. So ask somebody that you trust. And then last is you can check with your Department of Insurance. Okay, the Louisiana Department of Insurance absolutely does keep track of agents and companies and their past status, or if there's any complaints or claims against them. Okay, so if you want to find a new agent, you can easily call the Louisiana Department of Insurance and check on an agent's credentials. Okay, the next slide is how to choose a team of trusted experts, including insurance agents, lawyers, and contractors. Okay, so again, I say to you that, you know, look to your apartment association for long-term members, right? We've got insurance agents, lawyers, we have contractors that have been members of the apartment association for a long, long time. You can, again, ask other apartment owners who they use and do they trust them, okay? And this is just something that, you know, you would do if you were getting your house painted. So why not do this on a larger project, like at your apartment complex? Because we have had so many evacuations and therefore the catastrophic losses after storms, I'm going to recommend that you only use a local, licensed, and definitely insured contractor. Okay, after a storm comes, we got a lot of out-of-state fly-by-night contractors come in. They do shoddy work, and then of course you're never going to get them to come back. And since they're not licensed here in the state of Louisiana, you really have no recourse to go against them. So I refer you to, or I say, check your, the apartment association, check the Better Business Bureau, check the Home Builders Association. Normally, all of the Home Builders Association members are insured, licensed contractors, and they should have a good reputation. Law firms. Well, there's numerous law firms in the state of Louisiana, as everybody knows, and not all law firms are created equal. So I would again suggest that you check into the reputation of a law firm before you hire them. Use references, and note that there's a lot of bad law firms out there. This year, the Department of Insurance and our Attorney General had to come down on a law firm in Texas because they were doing, we think it was illegal what they were doing, and they state it wasn't, but in the state of Louisiana, it was. And so they are now prohibited from doing business in the state of Louisiana, and they're also part of a large class action lawsuit against them. So make sure that you do not just go with the lawyers that, knock on your door or on TV. Do some investigation and find the right lawyers. And then the last thing is public adjusters. The state of Louisiana is not really used to public adjusters, but yes, they have come into our state after the two major storms we had, Ida and Katrina. And there's a lot of different feelings about public adjusters, but there are a lot of regulations against public adjusters or to keep public adjusters in line. And I suggest that you know your state law about public adjusters before you hire one. Because once you hire this person, similar to the Texas law firm that came in and unbeknownst to all these people, they hired them without even knowing it. These public adjusters are regulated for a reason. And I just suggest that you search and figure out what the state laws are before you actually sign on with a public adjuster. I have no thing against public adjusters, but there's a lot of problems after. Okay, and the last frame we have is the understanding what the policy covers. So I could spend hours on this subject, but I'm just going to keep it to a minimum. And again, I say everyone should read their policy to know what is covered, or at least have a discussion with your agent on the policy limits, the deductibles, the exclusions, and the limitations, okay? Like I said, what's really, really important is that you understand that even though you might think you have $1 million of coverage on your building, you should have replacement costs, not actual cash value, because they will not pay you that $1 million if you have actual cash value. You should know what your the deductibles are in your policy, because if your deductibles are 5% on a building, it's going to be a lot of money to meet that deductible. You should absolutely know the exclusions. And if so, you try to buy these exclusions out of your policy. And then there are also limitations in a policy. You'd have to read, page for page to understand all these limitations, but your agent should be able to help you understand these limitations. So before you actually buy a policy, is what I'm suggesting, is that you know exactly what you're buying, so that later on, if a year or two later you have a claim, you're not then asking these questions. Yes, your agent is there to answer the questions again, but it would be great for you to know what you're buying and feel comfortable about it. Okay, so what are the proper limits? Are they adequate? Adequate to you may be one thing, but the lender is going to require you to carry the limits that they think is replacement cost coverage. And if you've purchased insurance in the last couple of years here in the state of Louisiana, the insurance companies have pushed the owners of these apartment complexes, frame I'm talking about, from as low as $75 a square foot, and we're all the way up to $130 a square foot now. Not quite a doubling, but over a 2-year period, that added to these 100% increases we were looking at. So the insurance market and the lenders are now pushing $130 a square foot, I apologize. So are your buildings insured adequately? They must beat $130 a square foot to get replacement costs these days. Are your contents limits accurate? Are your loss of rent limits accurate? The lender will tell you what your loss of rent should be, okay? So, like I said, the big thing right now is not only are we having rate increases in the state of Louisiana, my clients over the last 2 years have been forced to go up almost 30 to 40% a year in value. So if we had a 50% rate increase, but a 40% value increase, that equals 100% premium increase. And my clients have been saddled with this for 2 years in a row. So understand that these insurance companies can do this. They can force you to go up. The lenders will force you to go up, and you need to be prepared for it in your budgets, okay? And then the last thing I'm going to tell you is that, we're seeing 5%. Some companies are selling 10%. Prior to the storm, most frame apartments were at least 1% or 2% or 3%, but now everybody's 5%. So do the math, do you have the reserves for a 5% hurricane or hail deductible? If you have one building damaged and the building is insured at $1 million, you have a $50,000 deductible. But if you have 10 buildings insured at $1 million and they're all damaged, now you have a $500,000 deductible. But normally all of my insurance, all of my properties are 20 to 25 buildings. So in this case, you would have 20 buildings times $1 million at 5%. That is $1 million deductible. And so what we find is that a lot of my property owners do not have this money in reserve. And therefore, they're scurrying to find money to help pay for their deductible once they have these large claims. So like I told you, you really should look and speak with your agent about what a 5% wind deductible is going to cost. And then you might look into buying a deductible buy down product, which would bring your deductible to whatever level you could afford, right? The premium. And this will allow you to set your budgets a little bit more accurately, because like I told you, these in Louisiana, New Orleans especially, we have seen at least 100% to 150% increase over the last 2 years. That is a combination of insured value and rate increases. It's my opinion as an insurance agent, because I went through Hurricane Katrina, that if Louisiana can go one more year, at least through the 2023 year, I should say, without a storm hitting landfall, we very well could see at least a flattening of the rates and maybe a small, decrease in the rates. I do not expect a full-blown 50% decrease come April 1st of 2024. Just has got to do with what's called capacity in the market. There's just not enough insurance companies willing to write in our state. And the other reason is because the reinsurance market took a huge increase the last 2 years, which, of course, the reinsurance market is where the insurance companies buy their insurance to cover large losses. And those increases have to be distributed to the end buyer, which is the apartment owner. And this is why we've seen such a huge premium increase in the last couple years in the state of Louisiana. So I hope this answers some questions and gets you thinking about reading your policy and talking to your agent before you have the claim and not after. Thank you.